The Daily Camera and Brian Howell. We've had Brian on since back when there was thoughts about realignment and Colorado in the four corners in the Big 12 and more. He has been with us many times and joins us on this show today as Colorado gets ready for their game at KU. Brian, is that frozen?
This is just the monitor
thing.
Okay. It's up.
Brian, thank you very much for your time. So what is it like, my friend, in Boulder, Colorado, with the excitement of where they are and what they have in front of them?
Well, it's getting interesting, that's for sure. I mean, it's been interesting since Coach Prime was hired for obvious reasons, but it's getting interesting for football reasons, because obviously there's Heisman Trophy candidates and, Big 12 title on the line, things like that. So it's getting a lot of fun and certainly more meaningful November games than we've had around here in a long time.
Brian, in your opinion, what happened to them after that Nebraska game? Did they get humbled enough to where – they're still going to have flash, but did they get humbled enough to where it changed them fundamentally and they kind of knew that they had to toughen up? Absolutely.
I think it happened in the locker room at halftime at Nebraska. If you look at that game, they were down 28-0 at halftime. They outscored the Huskers 10-0 in the second half, which may not mean much to a lot of people. I promise you Nebraska was trying – they would have loved to have scored 56 in that game. Something happened to them at halftime where they kind of had that wake-up call like, okay, teams are not going to roll over for us, and we better be on point every single week. It really started at halftime at that point, and they've been really good outside of the loss to K-State, which came down to the wire. They've been really good ever since they came out of the locker room at halftime in Lincoln, and that flipped the switch for sure. And Shedeur, he did a Zoom with some media today. He mentioned that very thing. He wasn't even asked about it, but he said that Nebraska game really clicked for them.
Brian, what's it like right now? I mean, I know it's easy to see online, very vocal amount of fans online when it comes to Colorado, but actually in Boulder and the fandom, what's it been like to see not only a terrific season, but to be at this point in the season and having all that they have to play for still in front of them?
Yeah, it's exciting, but the one thing that's impressive about this team is that they're not getting caught up in all that stuff. I mean, they try to temper us a little bit, and they say, well, hold on, we still got to win this week. We don't care about Big 12 title and all those things like that. We've got to win this week or else none of that matters. And so the impressive thing about them is they've been very locked in and week out on just what's in front of them. That's why they're winning, is because they're not looking at the big picture. And it's because you have guys like obviously Coach Prime that knows how to win. Shedeur has been a winner. Travis knows how to do this. And you look at some of these other guys, and Nakai Hill-Green began his career at Michigan. Levanta Bentley, one of their linebackers, began his career at Clemson. These guys know what championship football looks like, and they've been able to lead this team through this.
Is it fair to say that despite the weapons of what Shedeur has with the wide receivers and the run game gotten slightly better, not great, but better, the protection is slightly better, but this team is in a position where they are now because what they've now done on defense. Not that they're perfect, but that has given them an opportunity to be where they are.
Absolutely. I said to a colleague today, obviously Travis and Shedeur are the face of this team. I think the defense is actually becoming the identity of this team because they're now showing that they can be physical with people, and they hit hard. I mean, if you watch that Utah game, they were very physical against what has been one of the more physical teams, well, really in the Pac-12, but obviously Utah is one of the more physical teams in the Big 12, even though they're struggling right now. That defense, they're almost 2 touchdowns better than what they were last year as far as points given up. They went from 35 points a game last year. They're around 22 points this year. That's been the massive change in this team, is that defense.
Brian, Juju Lewis, the big news today, obviously coming in. That pretty much solidifies Dion coming back, right? He's not going to just take a 5-star QB and then bounce.
Well, you would think so. I mean, I'm sure there's been times when coaches have signed a 5-star and then left, but a lot of the signs are there that Dion's coming back, and I think that's one of the big ones. Is I don't think Dion would do that to a kid that right now is 16 years old, and just leave after going through that full court press of getting him to Boulder. The kid commits and then leaving. So I think it does. I will say, I've been on record. I thought this was a 2-year deal and Coach Prime would leave after this year. I don't think that anymore. I think he's coming back.
Brian, what are the biggest questions you have about this team right now?
Offensive line for sure. I think that's still going to be a question mark throughout the rest of this season. I think that anytime they run up against a team that is going to be really strong in the trenches, they're going to have some trouble. That may not come until the college football playoff. I don't know, but look at Utah. I mean, Utah still got after Shedeur, quite a bit last week, and Kansas State got after him. Baylor was all over him, earlier this season. So that's still a question mark. But they've got so many weapons, and they've found ways to combat that that they can get through it. The bigger question is whether he's going to get hit hard enough at some point to where it knocks him out.
You mentioned the second half halftime and the second half against Nebraska. And even Gary Barnett has been on with us, and Matt McChesney talked about how they were bullied, and that woke them up a little bit. How much did winning the game by the way they did in that bang game with Baylor when it looked like they were dead in the water? Baylor went one way, now they've turned it around, but Colorado since that time seems to have put the afterburners on. Not just absolutely just like crushing people, but how much did that give this team a boost?
I think it was huge. To start Big 12 play like that, they were dead in the water. I mean, I was already writing my story about them losing that game because, frankly, there's no other quarterback I've covered at Colorado that would have made that play at the end of regulation and won that game. I tied the game, obviously, and sent it to overtime. But, I think that was huge for them. Nebraska woke them up. I think that Baylor game was maybe that sigh of relief, but also gave them like, okay, we may be able to do something special if we just knock off some of this other crap that we're doing here. And they've been pretty solid ever since then.
Brian Howell, the Daily Camera, with us from Boulder on 365 Sports.
Brian, do you think that they are deep enough and skilled enough now to win a playoff game, should they get there?
Yes, but it depends on who the matchup is. I think that's going to be the key for them is, again, if they run up against somebody that's just really dominant in the trenches, I think they're going to have a really hard time. I think, if they're like in Oregon, somebody like that will probably have their way with Colorado. But honestly, any team that has Shedeur Sanders on it, I'm going to give them a shot to win it, because of things like the Baylor game. They're never out of it. And, I think that he gives them a shot every single time. But I do think that any team that is really good in the trenches could beat them, but they are deep. I think they can beat a lot of teams in the country. There's probably only about 7-8 teams I look at right now and say, I really don't think they can beat that team.
We know they control their own destiny right now, but this is a big game coming up against Kansas, who is as hot as anybody. And you look at that schedule and you look, oh, man, look at all those losses. Well, look a little closer, right? And you see, like, those were very close to being a lot of wins, too. What stands out to you about Kansas, and what potential problems do you think they could pose, including, a road game for the Buffaloes this weekend?
Yeah, first off the road, I think that, Kansas obviously played very well at Arrowhead the last couple times they've been there. So that's going to be tough. But the Buffs have been phenomenal on the road. I mean, they've won 4 in a row on the road, and all of them have been blowouts. So they haven't done that in 30 years to where they've had a road streak like they are right now. So they love going on the road, actually. They told us after Texas Tech, when they had all the tortillas flying at them and everything, their players said, look, if people don't hate us, we're not comfortable. We like being hated. We like that. So I don't think that's going to be an issue so much as they got to stop Devin Neal. Jalen Jackson's going to be a tough one for them as well. And those corners, I mean, Kansas has legit secondary, and those corners can hang with CU's receivers. So that's going to be a fun battle, actually, to watch Travis Hunter, LeJontay Wester, and those guys against the KU corners. That could be a battle that kind of dictates what happens in this game.
Yeah, if somebody would have said back in August or when we were at Big 12 Media Days in July in Vegas that Kansas is going to have to beat Colorado to become closer to bowl eligible, and Colorado has a chance to maybe win to get to the Big 12 championship, they all would have thought we were kind of maybe on something, right?
Yeah, I was talking to a colleague again today, and we were talking about how often the view of this game has changed from August. In August, you thought, well, KU's they're going to win that game. They're one of the top in the Big 12. And then halfway through the season, you're like, well, man, KU's 1-5. Colorado's rolling. They're going to win that game. Well, now it's kind of like, ooh, that's going to be a tough one. So, I think honestly, had KU lost that game at BYU last week, I would have felt even stronger about Colorado this week, because KU would have had nothing to play for. But KU winning that game, pulling that out, and still having the bowl game carrot, I think is really huge for the Jayhawks, and it's going to make this even tougher for Colorado.
Brian, Dion Sanders, you mentioned that this team almost maybe feeds off the negativity or what people think. I think a lot of people respect the hat. I know there's that anger or hate, or people don't like the brashness, the glitz and glamour. But in my opinion, that hasn't been quite that way this year compared to maybe that 3-0 or whatever start it was after wins against TCU and Nebraska last September.
No, it hasn't. It's been very football, and the sidelines are still busy. Home games, you'll still see, some celebrities, but whereas last year was celebrities I could identify, this year it's not. This year it's some of celebrities like I don't know who that is. I'm guessing they're famous because they've got a lot of jewelry and people are hanging around them. But last year was more people I could recognize. This year I think they're very more focused on football, and not that they weren't last year, but I think there's a seriousness to what they're doing because they know they're a better team. I think they know they're a strong team this year, whereas last year was kind of like, let's set the foundation. This year they know they've got something, and you can tell there's a difference in Coach Prime. There's a difference in the attitude of this team.
Brian, thank you very much. We appreciate it, buddy. Enjoy it.
Thank you.
Enjoy it, and I know you have, and I know you will. It's been great for, I'm sure, what you do, and it's been great for the Big 12, the arrival of the four corners, but also the runs by different teams that we thought would be different teams, like Utah might be a part of it, Arizona might be a part of it, Arizona State and Utah and Colorado. Thank you, Brian Howell, with the Daily Camera in Boulder, for his time with us on 365 Sports.